Hello, welcome to Mart's Garage. I'm going to tell you a story. You've watched all the videos of the Volvo gearbox swap, and thank you very, very much to everybody who's followed the series and put comments in, and all the same names pop up on the comments. Very, very grateful to you all for following along. Here's the sedan, and it is up and running and driving. But now in time it is a little bit, it's a couple of weeks or even more past when I did the first start. As you can see, that isn't the engine that I had in there. I had my 4-inch stroke engine, the French engine, out of the Roadster. I am trying to decide how to present my first start video. I think I'm going to do it as a series of flashbacks from today. So I'll start at the beginning. I got it all in, everything's fine, the gearbox is in, everything's fine. I did the first start and I kind of thought, oh, this isn't very good. I'm a bit annoyed at myself because I didn't charge the battery up. The battery was a bit sluggish and it wasn't turning over very well. And here's a little clip. Battery's a bit low, isn't it? So as you can see, it wasn't turning over very well. When it did start, after jumping it from another battery, I had smoke coming out of the breather, or blow by, or something. I couldn't understand why the engine, after sitting for a couple of months, would be like that on the first start. I couldn't explain it. So I thought, well, this engine was running perfectly. The best thing to do is to get it out on the road and start driving it around, and it'll soon get itself back to how it was. So I did that, and I gave it a drive around, and I was able to drive it up and down the road, and I'll show you a little bit here where I'm trying the gears and trying the overdrive. So as you can see, it goes up and down the gears and it engaged the overdrive fine. You can hear the change in the revs. I was disappointed with the gearbox. It just didn't feel slick. The synchros seemed to struggle. I was pretty well disappointed, to be honest. Nonetheless, it was running, it was driving, and the overdrive worked. Some of you may remember the video I released a short while ago showing the Rover gas turbine car. Well, that was at Gaydon. I took the sedan to Gaydon. It's about a 25-mile drive on the motorway. Me and Jeff went and we had the overdrive doing it, and it was batting along great, running great. Down the motorway with the overdrive, and it made a big difference. It did make a difference, really pleased with it. To Gaydon. We're in the sedan and we're in overdrive. It is right. Overdrive switch. So I did all that. I went to Gaydon, came back, ran it around the roads locally, everything seemed fine. Until I almost immediately started noticing some problems. One of them was drips from the torque tube area. The other was oil leaks from the engine. So every time I'd park, there'd be drips on the floor from the engine and drips like big blobs on the floor from the torque tube. I thought, this isn't very good. I will investigate. So I took some measurements from the torque tube and worked out that the torque tube is running downhill. So I thought I will kill two birds with one stone. I'll strip the car down. Okay, let me backpedal just a little bit. I had an event coming up, the VHRA GOW event at Prescott at the hill climb, the Bugatti Owners Club hill climb track. And that was actually this weekend. I'm sitting here on Sunday and I was there yesterday racing. So I decided that I wanted to try and remedy these two issues before I went to GOW. So to do that, what I decided to do was change the front cross member back to the 32 cross member, and instead of having the back of the gearbox as low as I could, I'd have it as high as I could, both of which ought to lift the torque tube to try and keep the oil in the axle. I never noticed any problem with oil migration with the old setup with the Ford 3-speed. So I, took the radiator off, stripped it all down, pulled the motor out. Here's a little clip. And then I started looking at the sump pan and the gasket and all, where it looked like it was leaking. As I was looking at the underside of the engine, with the oil pan off, I noticed there appeared to be a lot of end play on the crank. I suddenly remembered that when I took the oil pan off and looked at it, I could see like little copper particles in the pan. So I looked at the end float, and it was, I didn't even measure it, but it was, really big. And I pulled the rear main and I saw that there was some damage to the rear main. Well, okay, the news isn't good. Look at this. That's the bearing. That's the rear side of it. There's the crank. Look at the thrust piece. That's completely scrap. That crank is scrap. Right, are you with me? You're following along? So bear in mind, I've got about a week to go before I'm running at GOW. So I think, okay, this motor's not gonna work, but I'll carry on with my plan. So I got the motor out to change the cross member initially, so I got the motor out. And one of the good things about this setup is that you can get the motor in and out and leave the gearbox in place. So I got the motor out and I got this engine sitting over in the corner. This was the engine that was in the sedan. So I put this engine in. And based on my noticing this problem with the thing, I started to investigate the length of the little adapter that I made for the input shaft. This piece. Okay. Now this is smaller than you might remember it. This was quite a bit longer, and it was longer there as well. After a series of experiments, I ended up shortening this part here. I don't know if you remember, there was a groove there, so I could pull the piece off, but it's quite a lot shorter than it was. Can you see that I'm trying to tell a very long story here? So I fitted that motor, and before I bolted it in solidly, I did tons of experiments to make sure that this wasn't causing a problem. And I measured the end float and got everything so I could measure the same end float after it was all bolted up than I could measure before it was bolted up. Okay, that's on 0. Got the lever in place. Pushing on the lever. Okay. So what's that? About 3 thou. So I built that motor up into a running unit, and I thought, okay, that's how I'm going to go. Just like that there. At that point, I'd got about, that must have been about on the Monday. I thought, well, what's wrong with the other engine? There's the other engine. So I put the other engine up on the engine stand. I got another crank in the shed. I put it in the lathe and cleaned it up. Here's a little clip. Hello. This is a 20 thou crank that I've had in the shed. And it is a 4-inch crank. I've cleaned it up a bit. It had just a little bit of surface rust there. And just tiny little bits here and there, but nothing bad at all. And it's cleaned up quite nicely. I assembled that up into that engine. The problem was, when I fitted the crank to that motor, there was a lot of end float on the crank, 20 thou. And I thought, it's not ideal, but it will run. And I decided to swap it in. So I took the radiator off, took it all apart, got everything out, took the motor out, and I fitted it back in. Got it running. Went for a drive, and it kind of drove okay, but there were lots of little niggly rattles. There was rattles that I didn't like. Bear in mind, I haven't got that many miles on the gearbox. I don't know if these rattles are coming from the gearbox, the overdrive, the torque tube, or the engine. I wasn't prepared, and it was quite bad. Here's a little clip. You can see on my face, you know, I don't like the sound of it. The go event is on the Friday and Saturday, and you just arrive on the Friday and then you race on the Saturday. And it's just over an hour from here, it's not too far. So this is Thursday, about midday. I decide I'm going to... Oh, yeah, and it's got an oil leak round here, look. It's got another, it is still chucking loads of oil out. And it had a rattle. So I had zero confidence in it. So I didn't do much filming, but I took it out again, drained it all down, took the radiator off, and dropped that motor back in. By the time this had come round, some bearings that I'd ordered, which have a 15mm bore instead of a 17mm bore for the pilot bearing, meant that I could put that motor in with a special bearing without this spacer. So that's how that is now. So that motor went in, and I took that car to go. I finished bolting it all in and putting the water in at about 11 o'clock on the Friday. Then I had to get all my camping gear ready, and basically the test drive was on the way. I didn't film on the way there, and I have took a few little clips there, but I will I'll just put one of the clips of the run up the hill here, so that you can see that the gearbox. This doesn't show the overdrive, but this shows the gearbox in use, and it's 4 speeds. Although on that track, I only used first, second, and third.
If you could do that with that one. Seriously.
A little bit rattly, wasn't it? Did you hear it?
Right.
What became obvious to me, with it all assembled up correctly, is that suddenly this gearbox that I wasn't very happy with, I was happy with, because the synchros are fine. The synchros are good, despite having to cope with the 10-inch clutch rather than the 9-inch clutch that the Volvo had. But no, the synchros are good. Everything's fine. I like it. This motor is a Bitzer motor. It was made up of all odd parts, and one of the problems with it is it has low oil pressure at low revs. And I kind of did okay on the track. I was really pushing it hard. And I glanced down, it was registering oil pressure up the hill, so that's okay. On the way home, the oil pressure dropped off to nothing. With it running constant high speed, I think when a lot of the oil gets up into the engine, it diminishes it in the oil pan, and with all the problems it's got with low oil pressure, I kind of limped home, and I stopped at a service area and bought some oil and put some oil in. I just drove it home nice and gentle, and that's how it is now. That's how I parked it last night. So there's the story of what I've been doing for the last few weeks, that I was disappointed at first, but unaware that basically I was just ruining my engine. The crank from this engine is completely ruined. Not from that engine, no, from the racing engine. It's down there somewhere. There it is. The thrust thing there is completely knackered. You can see it's pushed back, it's bent and pushed back. So that crank's destroyed. So I've knackered my engine, but the gearbox is good, and I haven't seen any footage yet of my car going up the track, that has been taken by anybody else. But I didn't notice any detriment at all from the change to the suspension, the shortening of the torque tube. The car drove really well. It cornered well, it drove well, it handled well. Nothing odd at all about the handling. So that part is a success. I don't know yet whether the change in the cross member and the raising the gearbox has helped with my oil migration. Now the dust has settled from me doing this fresh round of engine swaps to thrashing to get it finished. I will address some things there that I want to look at to see if I can help that situation. And I have another round of what might I do to that engine to improve the oil situation, or what can I do to this engine to improve the crank float problem and improve this. I suspect the PCV valve has failed in this engine. So anyway, so that I've got a few things that I want to do. But I wanted to round out my gearbox swap series with a little roundup, but there is just too much footage to show it all. So I thought I would do an overview and just insert little clips. And what I might do is make up a longer video of giving more detail of all that stuff. But as this stands today, on the Sunday after the GOW event, it's up and running and driving. I had a few little rattles last night which I couldn't explain, not from the engine, but they went away after driving. And there's like a certain road speed where you get like a little growl from it, but again, that goes away when it's driving slower or faster. There's the gearbox. You can see I've been doing rush changes. I've only got 2 screws in the floorboards, you know, one each side, and I left the cover off. I got a spare one of those and just dropped it over the thing just to protect it a little bit. That's the 4th gear interlock switch. So there's the gearbox in place. There's the overdrive in place. There's the torque tube bolt area. And here are an example of the drips. There's the axle. Yeah, and everything's all right. Brakes are okay. And a few people that had watched the series, you know, some of my friends have, you know, got down on their hands and knees and had a look underneath, and they said how it looks far more well proportioned in real life than the impression that you get from the videos. It was difficult to judge the kind of, you know, proportions of everything and how everything relates to everything else, but they said it looked like a really good, neat installation. So there we are. There's the sedan up and running, 4-speed gearbox, overdrive. And as promised in episode number 1, no cutting of the K-member. That could go back to Ford 3-speed and long torque tube at any time. So to round this up then, I'll just say thank you very, very much to everybody who's followed along. Thank you very much for everybody who's commented and clicked like. Thank you to the people that have subscribed recently. Thank you very much indeed. It all helps the algorithms. This has been a very intense project for me. I really, really enjoyed doing all the machining and everything. It's great doing the machining, you know, the bell housing and the overdrive unit. Problem is, putting it in a car and making it work is a lot more involved than many people would realise. Hence why there's been 12 videos on the subject. So look out for a video featuring GOW. Look out for possibly, I'm not promising, but possibly a longer video featuring the final stages from the first start to today, if people want to watch that in more detail. But I hope you've enjoyed my overview and little clips format of the first start. Let's just say the first start wasn't spectacular. Thank you very much for watching. Not just this, but the whole thing. Thank you very, very much. Take care, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers then. Bye.